Stop, yes, right now. You didn't arrive here by chance or impulse. You were guided by an invisible force that had been waiting for you for a long time. At the exact moment your eyes landed on these words, something stirred in the heavens. There was a sudden silence in the spiritual dimension, a sacred pause amid the world's noise. Angels bowed their wings, and a powerful, serene voice pronounced your name. From the beginning of time, God has recorded every one of your days, even those that seemed empty or repetitive. Nothing escaped his gaze. Not the tear you quickly dried so no one would see it, nor that forced smile to avoid worrying others. He saw it all. He saw how you gave without receiving, how you believed when everything was falling apart, how you kept going with a wounded soul but a steadfast heart. And though there were moments when you thought heaven was silent, that silence wasn't absence. It was preparation. During the time you felt nothing was happening, heaven wasn't idle. It was ordering paths, moving pieces, adjusting times, cleansing atmospheres. Nothing stopped. Everything was aligning in secret, far from your eyes, but close to his purpose. And now, after so much waiting, the appointed hour has arrived. The divine clock marked your name on its eternal face, and the heavens opened like a tearing veil. A stream of light descended upon you, and a voice sweeter than dawn and stronger than thunder whispered, "It's time." That phrase changed everything. The air you breathe now is charged with promise. The space around you has become an altar. Because when heaven pronounces someone's name, nothing is ever the same again. In this instant, as you read, there's movement in the invisible. Angels who were resting have risen. Doors that seemed sealed begin to turn on their hinges. Forgotten keys appear, paths open, and a wave of peace washes over your spirit as if your soul knows what your mind hasn't yet grasped. Heaven has just intervened on your behalf. It wasn't coincidence. It was divine synchrony. It wasn't chance. It was fulfillment. You were called to hear these words because heaven chose you for this moment. Everything that seemed stalled begins to move without your effort. Everything you thought was lost starts returning to you, but purified, multiplied, renewed. You won't have to push anymore, insist anymore, or prove anything, because the blessing they denied you is about to manifest without you lifting a finger. The entire universe is aligning around your name. The Father has ordered that what you waited for in faith and endured with patience be returned to you. And though you don't see it yet, the atmosphere has already changed. Celestial portals have been opened, and emissaries of light have been sent. In this instant, there's a decree hovering over your head, invisible to human eyes, but radiant in the spiritual world. Fulfillment. God didn't forget the seed you planted amid your weariness. He didn't ignore the yes you said when everyone expected you to give up. That silent obedience was the key that activated this hour. And now the voice of heaven resounds once more, clear, firm, unmistakable. The blessing they denied you will be delivered without effort. Heaven has spoken. The decree has been issued. And as your heart beats strongly, you feel a new peace, distinct. A certainty that doesn't come from understanding, but from the Spirit. That peace is the sign. That calm enveloping you isn't coincidence. It's God's presence confirming that the process is finished. Today isn't just any day. It's the day heaven leaned toward you, the day the impossible stopped being impossible, the day the promise that seemed distant drew close enough to brush against you, the day the doors opened without you touching them, the day your story began to be written with the ink of divine glory. Because God has pronounced your name, and when God speaks, the entire universe obeys. Nothing and no one can stop what has already been released. And as the air fills with a sacred calm, only one phrase remains echoing in the soul, firm as an eternal decree. The blessing they denied you will arrive without you moving a single finger. The night had fallen with its mantle of weariness and silence. Everything seemed the same as the previous days. The same starless sky, the same sensation of suspended waiting in the air. But that night wasn't like the others. In the invisible realms, something had been activated. A new decree echoed in God's throne, and its reverberation descended like a gentle vibration that pierced time and distance. That vibration touched your spirit, though you couldn't explain it. It was that sudden chill, that urge to stay still for a moment, that thought that crossed your mind without apparent reason. There's something different this time. And yes, there was. While the world slept, a divine announcement crossed the veil between heaven and earth. It was an order, an announcement, a confirmation. Heaven had decided to lean toward you. Angels were summoned, portals opened, and a deep voice spoke amid the silence. It's your hour. Where there had only seemed to be darkness, a light ignited without noise. It wasn't a burning fire. It was a revealing fire, one that began to illuminate the roots of your ancient prayers, those you thought forgotten, those you uttered without strength but with faith. Every tear that fell without witnesses turned into shining crystal before the throne. Every word of hope you spoke despite the pain now resounded like a celestial symphony that moved the wings of divine messengers. Heaven decided to respond not with noise, but with purpose, not with a deafening voice, but with a silent touch that reaches the soul. It was the news that interrupts the night, the voice that whispers in the depths. No more waiting, no more silence, no more denial. The divine presence began to traverse your story like a current of living water. It entered your memories, your wounds, your unfulfilled promises, and started restoring what was broken without permission. Because while you thought life had denied you opportunities, God had been keeping them to deliver them at a moment when you could hold them without losing yourself in them. Angels moved like gentle winds, changing the landscapes of destiny. Doors that had remained closed for years began to turn, creaking with the sound of the impossible opening, and you, without knowing it, began to feel it. That new peace, that deep breath, that calm you didn't know where it came from, it was the sign. It was heaven touching your surroundings. It was God reviewing your battles and saying, nothing was lost. Everything was part of my design. Every weight, every tear, every denial had purpose. I was in the silence. I was in the no. I was the one who hid the promise to preserve it from harm. Then the Spirit descended upon you like a breeze over parched earth. It didn't come to demand anything from you. It only came to remind you of what you'd forgotten, that you were never ignored, that your faith was never in vain, that your story always had direction, even if it seemed aimless. From that instant, the atmosphere changed. Shadows began to retreat. The air became lighter, and an invisible whisper enveloped your heart. Rest. Heaven has already started moving for you, and though you didn't see it with your eyes, in the places where destiny is decided, the movement had already been unleashed. God's hands were opening paths where none existed, moving hearts that previously didn't want to see you, restoring names that had been forgotten. Everything was aligning, everything was preparing, because when heaven decides to speak, neither time nor distance can stop the response. That night, while the world remained oblivious, your soul was a silent witness to a miracle. Heaven spoke your name with tenderness and authority, and the universe obeyed. Darkness lost its dominion, and the first light of fulfillment began to shine. It was just a glow, a spark, a promise in motion, but it was enough to know that something had changed forever. Heaven had interrupted the night, and in that divine interruption, the fulfillment of what you once thought lost began. From that moment, without you moving a single finger, everything started turning in your favor. For a long time, you believed the no's you received were punishments, rejections, or signs of failure. You walked with a wounded soul, thinking heaven had closed for you, that your prayers bounced off an invisible ceiling. You wondered 1,000 times why others advanced while you remained stuck. Why doors you opened with so much effort closed just as you were about to cross them. But what you didn't know was that every denial was disguised protection. God was preserving you, not depriving you. He was hiding you from the wrong place, the wrong hands, the environments where your light would have been extinguished. It wasn't rejection. It was divine preservation. Sometimes God's love dresses as a no to save you from something your eyes can't yet see. Heaven saw what you didn't. It saw the hidden intentions behind smiling faces. It saw the trap behind opportunities that seemed perfect. It saw the invisible bonds that would have tied you to pain. And while you cried, believing everything was over, God was raising walls of fire around you so the enemy couldn't touch your purpose. It wasn't contempt. It was strategy. Every time someone turned their back on you, heaven turned your face toward a path that truly led to destiny. Every door that closed was an invisible hand pushing you out of a route that would have destroyed your essence. Every time you were rejected, the spiritual universe shifted an axis, a coordinate, a time, until placing your life at the exact point where it was meant to flourish. Because there are blessings that arrive too early and wither, and there are others preserved in silence until the soul matures enough to hold them without getting lost. You needed time, not punishment. God wasn't denying you anything. He was preparing you for everything. The no's were the hands that shaped you. While the pain made you feel broken, heaven was forming you. You were clay on the divine potter's wheel. Every tear was water that softened your heart so it could receive more. In the moments you thought of giving up, God whispered in your spirit, "It's not that I don't want to give it to you. It's that I want you to be ready to hold it." And though you didn't understand it then, that apparent delay was a wall of protection against spiritual ruin. If you'd received what you asked for at that moment, it would have come with pride, with people who weren't with you, with burdens that would have crushed your peace. Heaven didn't want to see you win a battle, only to lose yourself later in confusion. That's why it halted the advance. That's why it allowed some to abandon you, others to forget you, even your own to not believe in you, because the stage had to be cleared before fulfillment. Nothing you lost was a mistake. Nothing that closed was coincidence. Everything had a heavenly reason. The no that hurt was God's voice protecting you in silence. While you cried, angels sealed doors that would have been traps. While you questioned, the Spirit moved your story to more fertile ground, where your seed of faith could grow without shadow. Look back for a moment. Remember that opportunity that seemed perfect and crumbled. That bond that broke without explanation. That project that vanished when you needed it most. Today, heaven allows you to understand. It wasn't the time, not the place, not with those people. It hurt to lose it, but if it had stayed, it would have damaged the purpose. God uprooted it not to punish you, but to save you. Because divine love doesn't always caress. Sometimes it uproots, prunes, disorders what seems stable. And when the soul complains about the loss, heaven smiles tenderly and says, "I didn't take it from you. I reserved it. Wait for the moment, and you'll see why I had to do it." That moment is this one, the time of understanding, the day of realization. Now you can look back and recognize that the no's didn't destroy you. They refined you. That every closure was redirection, every rejection a push, every fall a step. Life made you believe you'd been forgotten, but God never forgot the original plan. He was just moving the times so everything would arrive in the right season. That's why in this instant, as heaven watches you in silence, a voice speaks to your heart once more. What you lost wasn't your end. It was my hand pulling you from danger. I don't deny blessings. I mature them. And what I kept I deliver now, multiplied. That's the mystery behind every no. It was love disguised as denial. It was light hidden in shadow, protection dressed as delay. And now that you understand it, you can feel it in your soul. The wound that hurt transforms into gratitude. The sorrow that consumed you dissolves into peace. And the soul finally whispers with certainty, "Thank you, God, for all the no's that saved me." Because without them, you wouldn't be here at the exact point where the blessing that was denied you is about to manifest without effort, without struggle, and without human hands that could claim its glory. There's a moment in life, a sacred, silent instant, where the earth surrenders and heaven takes control. That moment comes when there's no strength left to push, when hands fall weary and the soul can only whisper, "Do it yourself, Lord." They're right there. What eyes can't see happens, the point where human effort stops and divine intervention begins. For years, you grew accustomed to fighting. You learned to resist, to keep going, to insist, to knock on doors, to sew even with a broken heart. You got up time and again, convinced the miracle depended on your constancy, your merits, your discipline. But God watched you silently, waiting for the exact moment when your will exhausted itself without surrendering. So, He could then take the helm of your story, because heaven doesn't burst in while the human being keeps trying to control the outcome. Heaven acts when the soul surrenders. And you've reached that point, the point of surrender, not abandonment. The point where you stop demanding answers from life and start trusting the plan you don't understand. The point where you no longer wear yourself out searching because you know what belongs to you will find you. That's the most powerful place of all, the site where the earth stops pushing and heaven begins to move mountains. It's not about passivity, it's about alignment. When you stop forcing what doesn't flow, the Spirit finds space to manifest. God never wanted to see you exhausted. He wanted to see you free of burden. That's why He allowed your human strength to reach its limit, not to punish you, but to show you that what comes isn't obtained with effort, but with faith. When the earth surrenders, heaven opens. When the noise of control ceases, the whisper of promise is heard. In the spiritual world, that moment has a sound. It's not a shout or an explosion. It's a sigh. The sigh of a soul letting go of the how and embracing God's when. The instant when tears stop being a demand and become worship. Heaven recognizes that sound, sees it as a sign of surrender, and when it hears it, activates its armies. That's what happened with Moses at the Red Sea. It wasn't his staff that parted the waters. It was his surrender. Moses raised the staff in obedience, but it was God who blew the wind that opened the path. He didn't need to push the sea. He only needed to believe. And that's what's happening with you now. Your obedience, though silent, has echoed in the heavens. Your small acts of faith have become giant movements in the spiritual world. And while you believed nothing was happening, the sea was beginning to part in your favor. The point where the earth surrenders isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's the revelation of one who finally understands it's not about doing more, but believing better. Surrender is the soul's bravest act because it requires trusting in something unseen, a time uncontrolled, and a promise that seems late but never fails. When you say, "Lord, I can't do it anymore," heaven responds, "Perfect. Now I can." And in that sacred exchange, weariness becomes an altar and silence transforms into voice. Your surrender isn't defeat. It's the signal that authorizes divine intervention. The heavens don't move by your strength, but by your yielding. Look around you. Everything that seems stopped isn't. It's waiting for your complete surrender to manifest. The angels escorting you can't move where there's anxiety, only where there's faith. That's why, when you stop fighting with your own strength and start resting in God's faithfulness, the portals begin to open, keys turn, chains yield, doors align, and miracles start flowing without you having to push them. This is that point in your life, the threshold where the impossible stops being a word and becomes direction. The line separating human frustration from divine manifestation. Everything coming from now on won't be born of effort, but of grace. And grace doesn't depend on your perfection. It depends on your surrender. So don't fear feeling like you have no strength left. Don't fear if it seems you can't go on. That's exactly where God wants to meet you, not to see you surrendered to pain, but to your power. From this instant, your yielding becomes a key, the key that opens the river, breaks the walls, accelerates time, aligns destinies. Don't seek ways to control what's already written. Just stay in peace, because heaven has already started moving, and your only task now is to remain still, confident, sensitive. The earth has surrendered, and heaven has finally taken control. From this point, everything that happens will bear the seal of His hand, not by merit, but by faithfulness, not by effort, but by grace. And as the spiritual universe arranges itself around your surrender, an eternal phrase is written over your destiny. What you couldn't achieve with your strength, I'll do with my power. The earth falls silent, heaven acts, and you, for the first time, Rest knowing you no longer need to lift a finger, because heaven is moving everything for you. There's a word heaven is pronouncing over you right now: restitution, not as mere consolation, but as divine justice. Because heaven doesn't forget, ignore, or remain motionless before injustice. Every tear you shed, every door unjustly closed, every time you were humiliated without reason or displaced without explanation, was recorded in the eternal archives of the kingdom. And now that book opens. The Lord's voice resounds firm and merciful. The time has come to return what belongs to you, but not as you lost it. Multiplied, purified, and glorified. Heaven doesn't return with empty hands. When God restores, He doesn't just replace, He renews. He doesn't give you back what you had, but something greater, because He doesn't repeat, He expands. His justice doesn't seek human balance, it seeks divine excess. That's why what's coming toward you won't be simple recovery. It'll be multiplied restitution, a manifestation of grace that surpasses logic and calculation. For a long time, you thought you'd lost time, that your efforts bore no fruit, that your prayers hadn't reached anywhere. But heaven saw every act of faithfulness, every time you loved without being loved, gave without receiving, believed without evidence. And though you didn't understand it then, those invisible seeds never died. They were just germinating under the soil of silence. And now, in this sacred time, that soil opens to return the fruit multiplied. Heaven has a law no man can alter. Everything sown in faith returns in glory. Everything you gave with tears will come back with laughter. Everything taken from you will return transformed. Nothing was lost. It was only stored in eternity's granaries, waiting for the exact moment to be released. And that moment is now. Angels have been sent with clear orders. Their hands hold ancient records of interrupted promises, spiritual contracts halted by envy, words unfulfilled due to others' interference. They don't come to give you what you lost. They come to deliver what was withheld from you, because heaven's justice doesn't return halfway. It returns in abundance. There are names that spoke against you, and God Himself says, "I'll erase the traces of their accusations with the ink of my favor." There are places where you were rejected, and heaven promises you'll return, but not as a beggar, as a testimony. There are faces that denied you a hand, and now the Lord whispers, they'll see my glory in you and recognize that I was with you in secret. God doesn't just restitute the visible, He redeems the invisible too. He goes beyond money, opportunities, relationships. He restitutes the peace they stole from you, the confidence they broke, the faith you almost lost. He enters the soul's spaces where pain took root and uproots guilt, shame, weariness, planting security, rest, and honor in their place. Divine restitution arrives in a different form. It doesn't present as a stroke of luck, but as a perfect succession of events that can only be explained with one phrase: God did it. People who forgot you will suddenly remember your name. Places where you were never invited will now open doors without you knocking. Opportunities that seemed lost will return in another form, but with the same purpose. And when that moment comes, you'll know it wasn't your effort. It was the fulfillment of the decree. There's a table prepared for you, a table where the past has no voice, where shame can't sit, where there's only room for the fulfilled promise. And as heaven organizes that banquet, the Holy Spirit says to you, don't think about what they took from you. Think about what I'm about to deliver, because what the enemy stole in years, I'll restitute in days. The restitution coming won't be private. It'll be public. God isn't content with restoring you in secret. He wants to do it before those who said you'd never rise again, not to humiliate anyone, but to show that faithfulness is always rewarded. Because when heaven decides to bless, neither human judgment nor envy can stop it. You'll see people who ignored you having to pronounce your name with respect. You'll see scenarios that once closed their doors, now calling you by direct invitation. You'll see projects that failed bloom with a force not from you, but from the hand of the one who promised to make a way in the desert. And when that happens, you won't say, "Finally, I achieved it." You'll say, "Finally, God fulfilled what he wrote from the beginning." Because in divine restitution, there's no human merit. It doesn't arrive by earthly justice, but by eternal grace. And that grace not only returns what you lacked, it adds what you never imagined. God is signing with his hand what others tried to erase with theirs. He's sealing with fire what was once denied with words, and doing it so no one can claim credit. When restitution arrives, it'll be so supernatural that even your tears will know it was heaven. This is the time when heaven inverts the scales. What was once loss will now be gain. What was shame will now be honor. What was scarcity will now be abundance. Not as a future promise, but as a current decree. And as these words penetrate your spirit, the air around you becomes light, as if a burden has been lifted. That sensation is the beginning. Restitution has already started, and nothing can stop it. Because God isn't just returning what was denied you. He's multiplying everything you endured with faith. From this moment, every step you take will be reclaimed ground. Every word you speak will be a blessed seed. Every day will be a reminder that heaven doesn't forget those who believed in silence. And so, without noise, without struggle, without moving a single finger, you'll see how what was denied you returns to you, shining, great and multiplied, signed with the eternal seal of divine favor. There are moments when heaven moves with such precision that no human can claim the credit, moments where everything fits with such supernatural exactness that neither the most calculated strategy nor the most improbable luck can explain it. That's where God's signature is revealed, in the unexpected turns, in the sudden changes that only heaven could have orchestrated. For years, you walked among failed attempts, prolonged silences and closed doors. You knocked, waited, insisted, and when you thought heaven had been silent forever, God was just waiting for the day of his perfect intervention. Because there are blessings that don't arrive while you're striving to control them. They arrive when you surrender enough to recognize his hand. And that moment has come. The time of invisible turns, of changes you won't be able to explain, of doors that open without you touching them. Heaven has moved in your favor, and it's done so in such a divine way that no one will be able to say, "It was because of me, my help, my idea." The miracle approaching will come so directly from above that the only phrase you'll utter is, "God did it." That will be your response, your banner, your testimony. And when others try to understand how it happened, they won't be able, because God doesn't share his glory with men. He prepares scenarios where human intervention has no room, where probabilities are zero, where the only possible explanation is his power. That's how you'll know it wasn't you who moved the pieces, but him. There's a silent movement that started days ago. People you don't know are thinking of you without knowing why. Invisible conversations are happening in your favor. The name you thought forgotten is starting to resonate in places you never dreamed of. There are decisions being made in offices, hearts, and paths, and all converge toward you. You don't see it. But heaven has turned your story in such a way that the outcome won't depend on your effort, but on the Spirit's perfect synchrony. Because when God decides to work, time bends, spaces align, hearts soften, routes open, and nothing, absolutely nothing, can stand in the way. What seemed lost starts returning. What seemed distant draws near. What seemed impossible starts flowing. Not by logic, but by mandate. Not by insistence, but by grace. Not by your ability, but by his faithfulness. This turn happening won't be gradual. It'll be sudden. So sudden you'll barely have time to comprehend it. A call, a message, an unexpected encounter, a door you once said never again to, and suddenly it opens anew, but not the same. Transformed, because heaven never returns something broken. It restores it in glory. There will be clear signs. People who once rejected you will now seek your advice. Those who closed doors on you will now invite you. Those who spoke ill of you will now recognize your purpose. And when all that happens, you won't feel pride or revenge, but a peace so deep you'll know it was God's justice, not yours, that spoke. The Spirit prepares you for that moment. It whispers in your ear, don't rush to tell how it happened. Wait, let the evidence speak. Let your transformation be the answer. Because divine turns don't announce themselves. They manifest. No one saw Lazarus's resurrection coming until they heard his name from the tomb. No one expected Joseph to go from prison to palace in a single day. No one imagined David, ignored among sheep, being anointed king before his unbelieving brothers. So it will be with you. One day everything will seem the same, and the next everything will change. That will be the turn, the exact instant where your story takes a direction even you wouldn't have planned. And when the miracle is fulfilled, when the news arrives, when the promise touches your door, heaven will remind you, see, you didn't need to move. It wasn't your strategy. It was my intervention. God is moving the threads of the invisible, connecting points that seemed disconnected, restoring paths you thought closed. He's placing your name on the lips of those who hold the key to your next step. And all this happens while you remain still, confident, believing. The obedience you sowed in silence is now blooming as fulfillment. You won't have to justify yourself or convince anyone of your calling. The facts will speak for themselves. The glory will be so evident that even your enemies will have to recognize it. And in their astonishment, the word will be fulfilled. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. The approaching turn will be complete. It won't just change your circumstances. It'll change your spiritual position. You'll go from being the one waiting to the one manifesting, from asking to answering, from begging to giving. Because the purpose of the miracle isn't just to show power, but to show inheritance. God's favor over your life won't be momentary. It'll be continuous. It'll be living evidence that heaven fulfills what it promises, even when men doubt. And when that moment comes, because it will, close your eyes, breathe deep and say, thank you, God, because this wasn't luck. This was you. Then you'll understand something that will forever change how you see life. Divine turns aren't surprises. They're answers the soul recognizes when the earth surrenders and heaven takes control. So in silence, without warning, without noise, you'll see how everything aligns, how everything fits, how everything changes. And you'll know this turn didn't come from your hands, but from the eternal hands that never forgot your name. In heaven there are no delays, only exact times. What seemed like delay to you was precision to God. There's an invisible clock governing the pulse of your destiny. A clock that doesn't advance a second early or lag an hour. And though you often looked at the calendar with anguish, believing years passed without response, heaven never stopped measuring each of your seasons. While you saw seconds slipping away, God was building scenarios. While you despaired over the wait, He prepared the perfect coordinates, people, places, opportunities, and exact moments so everything would fit with a perfection only the Spirit can trace. Because heaven's promises aren't fulfilled by anxiety, but by alignment. And that alignment, beloved son, beloved daughter, has just been completed. The celestial clock has marked your hour. The hands of divine time have moved, and a chime echoed in the invisible. That vibration you felt lately, that sense something is about to change. It's not human intuition. It's spiritual synchrony. It's heaven telling you now. Every tear, every yes you gave, every time you chose to keep going when no one understood, it all added seconds to that clock. Nothing was in vain. Heaven keeps exact account of your faithfulness. When you believed nothing was happening, the minutes were accumulating in your favor. Every day you resisted without surrendering advanced the clock another notch. And today, at this precise moment, the hands have coincided at the point of fulfillment. Human time says, too late. Divine time responds, right on time. Because Earth's delays are just heaven's strategies to protect you from the chaos of the premature. God didn't want to give you an incomplete blessing or deliver you to people not ready to hold you. That's why He halted the movement until the stage was clear, until the right hearts took their places. Heaven's clock isn't guided by your longings, but by your preparation. It doesn't move with your emotions, but with your maturity. And you've been matured in the fire of the process. You've learned to wait without losing faith, to believe without evidence, to love without reward, to sow without guarantee. And only that what activates the divine clock. There's a sound in the heavens announcing this hour. It's a heartbeat, a holy rhythm, vibrating to the beat of your name. What seemed stopped starts turning. What was closed begins opening. What stagnated starts flowing with supernatural speed. And the most surprising thing is that it'll all happen so naturally, it'll seem like coincidence, but it won't be luck. It'll be heaven's clock fulfilling its eternal calendar. Imagine a huge board filled with golden pieces. For years, those pieces moved without you noticing. A conversation, a closed door, a person who left, another who arrived unannounced. Each movement was part of a map only heaven could read. And now, in this exact season, all the pieces fit. The picture reveals itself, the purpose takes shape, time finally obeys. Because when heaven decides, time obeys. The hours the enemy stole from you will be returned with interest. The years you cried in waiting will be years of harvest. The days of weariness will become days of honor. God's clock doesn't run late, it accumulates blessing. Every second you waited in obedience turns into multiplication at the moment of fulfillment. There are angels tasked with guarding the kingdom's clocks. They move when the Father says now, and that word was pronounced over you. Now, not later, not in another life, not in another season. Now, that's why you feel everything changing suddenly. That's why you perceive people starting to move, paths opening, something invisible reordering your surroundings. It's not coincidence. It's heaven's clock chiming over your name. At this point, times accelerate. Favor starts outpacing your effort. Resources arrive before you ask. Answers appear before you formulate the question. Heaven enters fulfillment mode, and you, without moving, without pressing, without touching, will see everything align in perfect harmony. Remember this, God's time never arrives late. It arrives glorious. It comes at the exact point where the soul surrenders and purpose blooms. And when that synchrony completes, no worldly force can reverse it. Just as dawn can't be stopped by night, the hour of fulfillment can't be braked by doubt. And you're in that dawn. Heaven's clock marked your name with fire. The bells ring over your destiny, and an eternal voice, firm and loving, declares from on high, their hour has come. What they waited for in faith, what they cried in silence, what they held without applause, now it manifests. They won't lift a finger. They'll only see time bending in their favor. That's how heaven works. When the earth surrenders, time bends. And when the divine clock chimes, nothing and no one can stop the fulfillment of a promise. This is your hour. The clock has spoken. Heaven has turned, and everything denied you starts racing toward you with the perfect force of God's time. There are wounds that don't destroy. They crown you. And there are tears that don't dry with time. They become oil of anointing. Every pain you endured, every night where your prayer was just a sigh, became a seed of spiritual authority. That authority isn't bought, inherited, or learned from books. That authority only comes from brokenness, from the process, from faithfulness tested in the fire. God didn't choose you when you were strong. He chose you when you were broken. He didn't call you when you had a voice, but when silence weighed more than your words. Because it was in that silence, in that darkness where no one understood you, that your soul began to be shaped like a weapon of light. Heaven doesn't form its own on golden thrones, but in places of pain. That's where tears wash the soul's gaze, where pride dissolves, where faith stops being talk and becomes substance. That's why don't curse your tears. They were the workshop where God formed you. Your authority was born from crying, not applause. Every time you cried without strength, heaven recorded it. Every sob, every groan, every heavy breath in the early morning was a prayer more powerful than 1,000 words. The Father didn't just hear them. He translated them into decrees. Your tears were ink in the book of purpose, and now the same heaven that kept them is transforming them into power, honor, and backing. That authority you carry isn't visible to the naked eye. It's not measured in titles or human recognition. It's invisible but unbreakable. When you speak, the atmosphere changes. When you pray, chains yield. When you stay silent, the atmosphere clears. Because you carry the voice of one who has been tested, the echo of one who resisted without losing faith. For a long time, you wondered why you had to go through so much pain. You questioned if it was worth continuing to believe, if faith made sense when everything seemed to crumble. But what you didn't know was that the fire surrounding you wasn't punishment. It was consecration. God was purifying the metal of your spirit, and when gold is purified, it first shines less. It melts, breaks down, loses shape. But after the test, it gleams with a purity nothing can corrupt. That's how heaven has formed you amid tears and resistance. That's why your authority doesn't come from what you know, but from what you lived. Your voice has power not because you shout, but because it's been anointed by brokenness. The people around you will feel something different when you speak. They won't just hear your words, but the weight of everything you overcame. The power of your faith has become contagious because you know what it's like to hold on when no one else does. There's a level of grace that only activates when one traverses the valley of pain with faithfulness. And you traversed it. You walked among ruins with a silent heart, believing without seeing, advancing without strength, loving without receiving. That gave you something many don't understand: spiritual authority. Because the one tested and unbroken, who cried but didn't flee, who bled but kept praying, becomes a living sign of divine victory. That's why now, when you intercede, the heavens open faster. When you decree, your words don't float. They travel with power because they were forged in pain, tempered in fire, and sealed with obedience. Every tear you shed was a drop of oil that today becomes anointing of authority. And the Father says you didn't cry in vain. Each tear fell on the earth like a seed, and that seed germinated power. That's why today your word has weight, your presence has purpose, and your steps carry fire. The enemy thought your tears were weakness, but they were actually your training. He thought your brokenness would leave you voiceless, but it sharpened your sword. He wanted your pain to silence you, but that pain gave you a new sound in heaven. Now when you speak, angels recognize the vibration of your faith. They know you speak from the depths, not the ego. Men may forget your battles, but heaven doesn't forget your resistance. That's why every tear has a response, and every wound a reward. The place where you cried will become the same site where you laugh. The ground that was pain will be where the miracle springs forth. Shame will be replaced by honor, and loneliness by heavenly company. Now you understand you weren't weak when you cried. You were being empowered. Each tear was a silent vote of faithfulness to heaven, and God doesn't forget it. That's why, when the world sees what's about to manifest in your life, they won't understand how you did it. They won't know how much your victory cost. They won't know how much you cried to get there. But you will. And in your heart you'll say with humility and strength, this didn't come from success. It came from pain, and pain in God's hands became authority. From this day, everything you speak, touch, or undertake will bear the mark of your process. Your voice will be balm for the suffering, fire for the doubting, impulse for those about to give up. Because one who has cried like you knows how to lift the fallen. Your crying wasn't loss, it was preparation. Your wound wasn't ruin, it was a door. And through that door now flows an anointing that can't be imitated or manufactured. Heaven looks at you and declares, your training is finished. You no longer cry for what you lost. You cry for what's been revealed to you. Your pain turned into power, your process into authority, your crying into inheritance. That's why fear no more what hurt. Don't deny your scars. They speak the language of the redeemed. They're the marks hell can't erase, the proof you survived the fire without losing faith. That's your credential in the kingdom, the authority born only from tears. And as heaven watches you tenderly, a voice resounds over you as clear as dawn. From your crying was born power, from your wound wisdom, from your test purpose. Now walk with authority, because your pain has been crowned with glory. There was a season when silence enveloped you like fog. Nothing seemed to advance, nothing responded, nothing made sense. Doors were closed, opportunities slept. People who promised to walk with you disappeared. And you, amid that apparent stillness, came to think heaven had forgotten you. But it wasn't forgetfulness. It was divine strategy. God didn't hide you to punish you. He hid you to prepare you. He kept you from wrong eyes, envious tongues, impure hands. He took you to places where no one else would see you, not to deny you to the world, but to form you in secret. Because God's most powerful works aren't built in public. They gestate in the hidden, in anonymity, in silence. The Father saw that others' noise was trying to drown your purpose. That's why he set you apart, silenced you, hid you under his shadow. While you felt yourself fading, he was igniting you from within. While you believed your light was extinguishing, he was shaping your shine for a greater revelation. The process was long. You know it. They were days of unanswered questions, nights of prayers without echo, seasons when the soul cried out, "Where are you, God?" And though you heard no response, he was closer than ever. His silence wasn't absence. It was covering. He was covering you while the world wasn't ready to see you. He hid you because your value wasn't yet understood. Look at the story of the chosen. Joseph was hidden in prison before becoming governor. Moses was concealed by the Nile before freeing his people. David was kept among sheep before reigning over Israel. And Jesus lived 30 years in anonymity before manifesting the Father's glory. All of them passed through the school of hiding. And you weren't the exception. God knew that if he showed you too soon, foreign voices would destroy you, empty praises would corrupt you, or manipulation from those who didn't discern your essence would twist you. That's why he kept you in shadow, protected you in the invisible, cultivated you like a seed under soil. The world believed you didn't exist, that you'd vanished, that your purpose had withered. But while they wrote you off as lost, God was preparing you to bloom in terrain where no one could claim your growth. In the hidden, you learned things the visible don't know. You learned to depend only on God's voice, to walk without applause, to believe without witnesses. You learned that loneliness wasn't punishment. It was training. That silence wasn't abandonment. It was inner dialogue with the Spirit. That darkness wasn't condemnation. It was a womb. Yes, you were in the womb of purpose, gestated in secret to be born in glory. Heaven works that way. First it hides, then reveals, and now you're reaching that final phase, the revelation. The Father has deemed your process complete. The seed sown in tears has germinated. The sprout no one saw is already breaking the soil. The silence that covered you is lifting, and God's voice is heard again saying, "It's time for what I formed in secret to come to light." This is the point where waiting ends and exposure begins. But not empty or vain exposure, an exposure with purpose. The world won't just see your achievements. It'll see your transformation. It won't admire your shine, but the fire that purified you. Because what God reveals isn't for entertainment. It's to impact. And impact only happens when what's revealed has first been forged in fire. That's your story. The fire formed you, silence taught you, loneliness cleansed you. And now revelation will raise you. Everything you were in secret, the battles, tears, silent victories, will be used as public testimony, not to boast, but to show that faithfulness in the invisible always produces glory in the visible. And when the moment comes, because it's near, nothing and no one can prevent your manifestation. No obstacle can withstand what God himself is presenting. Heaven won't present your name by chance, but by decree. And when it does, you won't need to defend yourself, justify, or explain your process. Your fruit will speak, your presence will suffice, your essence will be evidence. God didn't form you for immediacy, but for permanence. That's why the process was long. Deep roots take time to grow. And now that those roots are firm, the tree can rise without fear of falling. Your growth will be rapid but stable. Your ascent sudden but sustained. And those who saw you disappear will be surprised to see you return with a light not from effort, but from divine fire. Heaven is telling you, I hid you so you wouldn't be contaminated. I set you apart so you wouldn't be confused. And now I show you so my glory can be seen through you. Nothing was lost, nothing waste. Every day of silence was a lesson, every hour of waiting an investment, every tear in solitude a pact between you and God. Now, when you reveal yourself to the world, you won't do it with anxiety, but with peace. Not to be seen, but to serve. Not to prove who you are, but to manifest who He is in you. And when they see you rise, when they see you walk in purpose, when they marvel at your transformation, you'll just smile and say, I didn't disappear. I was hidden by God, because the one hidden with purpose was never forgotten. He was preserved, shaped, and prepared to be revealed at the exact time where your light would illuminate without fading. Thus, the Spirit tells you, what the world thought was your end was my workshop. What they believed was defeat was my design. And now, emerging from the hidden, you'll shine with a light that doesn't fade, because it was lit in the soul's silence. Prepare yourself. The veil is lifting. Anonymity is ending. Your time of revelation has arrived, and when the world sees you, it'll know your process wasn't punishment. It was coronation. There are moments in life when the soul tires of carrying what it can't control. Invisible, silent burdens heavier than any stone. The fear of failure, anxiety for tomorrow, pain for what wasn't, guilt for what you couldn't avoid. And a point comes when the body keeps walking, but the spirit is exhausted. That's where heaven, in its infinite tenderness, invites you to the exchange. God doesn't want to see you dragging the weight of what only He can bear. He doesn't want you living under the yoke of constant worry or wearing yourself out trying to resolve what belongs to the divine realm. That's why, at this part of the path, the Father leans in, looks at you with compassion, and says in a soft but firm voice, "Give me what you're carrying. Give me your burden and take mine. Yours destroys you. Mine transforms you." The exchange of burdens isn't symbolic. It's a real movement in the spiritual world. It happens when you decide with all your heart to let go of control. When you finally dare to stop manipulating destiny's threads and tell heaven, do it yourself. In that instant, something changes. No loud sound is heard, no visible light seen, but the soul knows. The weight begins to dissipate. Because peace doesn't arrive when problems disappear, but when you surrender them. Rest doesn't begin when the storm stops, but when you stop fighting the wind. And that's what heaven is doing with you now. It's teaching you to rest, not to give up. For a long time, you thought letting go was losing, but the Spirit reveals that letting go is trusting. That one who releases with faith doesn't stay empty, they stay light. That one who surrenders doesn't abdicate responsibility, but recognizes the limits of their strength. And in that humility, God begins to act. There's a divine mystery in surrender. When the soul empties, the Spirit fills it. When the heart releases what hurts, God's hands gather it and redeem it. That's why every tear you've shed lately had purpose. It dissolved the chains of control. They were tears of cleansing, tears preparing the ground so heaven's peace could dwell in you. The exchange is happening as you read these words. God is taking your burdens one by one. The worry for the future, the anguish over debts, the pain from that loss you still don't understand, the guilt over errors you keep carrying like they're eternal. In exchange, He's depositing in you something you haven't felt in a long time. Lightness. That deep calm not from the mind but from the spirit. The air feels different when you surrender your burdens. You breathe slower, tensions dissolve. The heart no longer races from fear but beats with gratitude. Because now you don't have to understand everything. Just trust. You don't have to move everything. Just believe He's moving it for you. Jesus said it once, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." It wasn't poetic. It was spiritual instruction, a call to swap your weights for His peace, your struggles for His purpose, your anxiety for His grace. And that invitation remains open. Today, you can give Him what exhausts you, not with fear but with hope. Because heaven doesn't despise empty hands. It fills them. Imagine for a moment you're walking and see the Father waiting on the path. His arms are open, hands extended. He doesn't demand words or explanations. He just invites you closer. And you, tired with a worn soul, approach slowly. He smiles, looks into your eyes and says, "Give me that. You've carried enough. Let me do it." And when you place your burdens in his hands, you don't feel loss, you feel relief. Because the burden he takes never returns empty. It always comes back transformed as blessing. Sometimes heaven's answer isn't adding more, but removing what's extra. Not giving you strength to keep carrying, but lifting the weight so you can fly. That's the new stage you're entering, the time of divine lightness. Everything that was once struggle will now be flow. Everything that was pressure will now be direction. Because when you stop pushing, the Spirit's wind begins to blow. The exchange of burdens is also an exchange of voices. Before, you heard the noise of your thoughts. Now you'll hear God's peace. Before, fear spoke. Now faith speaks. Before, urgency guided you. Now trust does. The soul that releases finds a new melody, a harmony born of rest. And so, as you walk without that ancient weight, you begin to feel something reordering inside you. Your steps become firmer, your gaze clearer, your breathing deeper. Because when the soul empties of fear, God's love fills it completely. God doesn't want you advancing tired. He wants you advancing confident. He doesn't want you dragging promises, but walking lightly over them. And that's the pact being signed over your life right now. While you rest in me, I work for you. Heaven won't ask for more effort from you. It'll ask for more surrender. Because the strength of faith isn't in doing, but in trusting. It's not insistence that opens doors, it's peace. And when the soul finds that peace, doors open on their own. That's why the Spirit whispers to you today, let go. Not because you've lost faith, but because you've believed enough. I'll handle the rest. And so, as tears fall for the last time, not from pain but from relief, you understand the exchange was real. You no longer carry what oppressed you. Now you carry light, peace, purpose. You no longer walk in fear but in certainty. You no longer force the impossible. You let the miracle flow. From now on, when shadows of the past try to return, just say in silence, that burden isn't mine anymore. I gave it to heaven, and the weight will disappear because the exchange is sealed. What you carried, God now carries, and what God carries always turns into blessing. Walk light, rest deep, trust without fear, because the burden is gone and heaven is at work. There's an instant in every human story when heaven decides to reorder the earth around you. It's not coincidence, luck, or simple seasonal change. It's divine alignment, a silent movement, almost imperceptible, but perfectly calculated by the Creator's hands. In that instant, everything that seemed chaotic starts making sense. Loose pieces find their place, roots straighten, times synchronize, and what was stalled begins flowing without effort. For years, you felt like you were advancing against the current. It seemed the more you prayed, the further fulfillment receded. You surrounded yourself with people who said they understood you, but didn't. You tried opening doors that only returned silence. But what you didn't know was that it wasn't rejection. It was misalignment. You were in the right spiritual place, but surrounded by pieces that didn't yet fit. Heaven needed to adjust times, move hearts, remove places, cleanse atmospheres, so everything would be ready for what begins today. Because blessing can't be delivered in disorder. Heaven never pours oil on a dirty or broken vessel. First it cleans the environment, then positions the right people, and only then activates the promise. That's why there was so much confusion. That's why some friendships cooled, certain bonds broke, projects paused. Not betrayal, but selection. God wasn't taking people from you. He was surrounding you with purpose. Every separation, every silence, every distance was part of a greater design. While you cried over what was leaving, heaven celebrated what was coming. You couldn't see it then. But God doesn't destroy without planning to rebuild with excellence. Everything that collapsed did so to raise something stable, eternal, genuine. And now, after so much chaos, heaven begins realigning your universe. There are invisible movements happening as you read this. People you don't know feel an impulse towards you without knowing why. Opportunities that seemed closed are beginning to turn slowly on their spiritual hinges. Places where you found no space are starting to open without you touching them. Everything aligns, everything falls into place. Nothing you lived was in vain. Everything was part of precise orchestration. God always works with precision. Every step you took, even those that seemed mistakes, were necessary coordinates to bring you to the meeting point with your destiny. And that point is called alignment. When your faith coincides with His will, your process with His purpose, your life with His promise, heaven is aligning people. Those who betrayed you are being removed from your path. Those who didn't understand you are being replaced by kindred souls, people who'll speak your same spiritual language, who won't compete with you but walk with you. They'll be sent helps, pure connections, friendships born of the Spirit, not interest. You'll recognize them because they'll bring peace, not confusion, direction, not doubt, impulse, not weight. It's also aligning places. There are environments where your soul no longer fits because your spirit has grown. Places that were once refuge will now be transit. Sites that gave security will now seem narrow. And that's okay. It means you're leaving a small room for a bigger house. Don't fear if the environment changes suddenly. Expansion requires movement. What disorders in the visible is because God is reordering the invisible. And finally, heaven is aligning moments. That's the most sacred, most perfect part. Everything you awaited, every promise, every word that seemed stuck, is receiving the exact time to manifest. Because though you think you lost time, God's clock never goes backward. It only accelerates at the right moment. When He sees you're ready, everything happens at once. The promise that gestated for years manifests in days. The prayer you made with tears fulfills with a sigh. The opportunity that seemed closed presents without warning, and you'll know it was Him because it'll happen with ease. That's the sign of alignment. When what once cost you so much starts flowing without effort, when you no longer push doors because they open at your sight, when you no longer seek opportunities because they seek you, when you stop running after people because now people approach without you calling them. That's not coincidence. That's heaven working with millimeter precision, adjusting everything to your purpose. But there's something deeper the Spirit wants you to understand. Alignment doesn't just happen outside. It happens inside you too. For years, your thoughts and emotions didn't walk in sync. Your mind said, "I believe," but your heart still feared. Your mouth declared faith, but your soul still doubted. That's why the process was long. Heaven was aligning your interior with your promise. And now that everything inside you vibrates at the same frequency, manifestation can't be delayed, because when the interior aligns, the exterior responds. You're entering the season where everything makes sense. You'll look back retrospectively and say, "Now I understand why that door closed, why that person left, why that project failed." You'll see how what seemed loss was protection. What hurt was training. What took so long now arrives right on time. And you'll know every tear, every silence, every weight were necessary pieces in this heavenly puzzle. God is aligning your name with your purpose with your inheritance with your generation. And when all that fits, glory can't be hidden. No human or spiritual force can divert what's already decreed. Because what's aligned with heaven doesn't twist, break, or stop. The Spirit whispers, "I'm putting everything in its place. Right people, right times, right paths. Don't rush what's already in motion. Just stay in peace, because as you rest, I align the universes. And as that word fulfills, you feel a different calm, a certainty you can't explain with logic, but that fills your being. Heaven is already at work. What once seemed confusing now shines with clarity. Steps become firm, signs multiply, and life regains direction. That direction doesn't come from your strength, but from the divine flow that began today. You won't have to force anything. Heaven has already organized everything that was scattered. People, places, moments. All has been aligned. And in that perfect order, you'll finally understand you didn't lose time. Time was preparing you. That's why when everything starts happening and they ask how you did it, you'll simply say, with peace in your soul and shine in your eyes, "I didn't achieve it. God aligned it." Everything God wants to manifest in your life first passes through the threshold of your mind. Before materializing miracles, He plants them as thoughts. Before moving the external, he transforms the internal. And it's that the mind, that silent territory where your doubts and dreams dwell, is the first battlefield where it's decided if a promise lives or dies. For years, you thought the hardest war was against circumstances, but the Spirit now reveals that the true battle was always inside you, because what you believe you create. What you imagine with faith manifests, and what you constantly fear you attract. Your mind is a spiritual magnet that translates thoughts into reality, an invisible laboratory where the soul's decrees take shape before being born on earth. That's why the enemy never attacked your hands, but your thoughts. He didn't want to take your strength. He wanted to cloud your vision. He whispered lies disguised as logic. You're not enough. It's too late. No one will help you. That's not for you. And little by little, he sowed seeds of doubt in the same soil where God had planted promises. But heaven doesn't stand by with folded arms when a child starts believing lies. That's why God has come to renew your mind. He doesn't just want you to believe in his power. He wants you to think like an heir to that power. Because there's a difference between praying for miracles and thinking like someone who already lives in them. The prayer asks, the heir manifests, and you've been called to manifest, not beg. Heaven didn't create you to plead for blessings, but to open their door with your faith. When the Holy Spirit dwells in you, every thought begins to have eternal weight. A single idea born from faith can move mountains, alter realities, change destinies. That's why the Father teaches you today to tend the garden of your mind. He tells you with firm, tender voice, guard what you think, because every thought is a key. What you imagine in faith opens doors. What you hold in fear closes them. For a long time, your thoughts were prisoners of the past. You remembered wounds and dressed in guilt. You mentally repeated words others said to destroy you. And without realizing, you raised mental walls that blocked blessing's entry. God didn't leave. It was your mind that built a barrier between what you believed possible and what he wanted to give you. But that barrier is falling now. The Spirit is tearing down the invisible strongholds fear built. This is the time of the free mind. A renewed mind doesn't fear the future because it knows it's already written in your favor. A clean mind doesn't contaminate with doubt because its filter is faith. A mind aligned with heaven doesn't need to see to believe. It believes and then sees. God wants you to start imagining differently, stop visualizing sad endings, and start seeing inevitable victories. When you think of your tomorrow, don't see scarcity but abundance. When you remember the past, don't see losses but training. Because the mind he's forming in you no longer thinks like a victim, but like a beloved child. Do you know what the greatest miracle can be? Not that your circumstances change, but that your perception changes. Because when the mind aligns with heaven, even pain finds purpose, and the storm becomes direction. It's not magic, it's revelation. It's the mind understanding that everything happening, even what hurts, is part of the divine plan. Heaven reminds you, you can't receive what your mind rejects. You can't hold what you don't believe you deserve. And you can't advance if you keep thinking like someone expecting punishment instead of inheritance. That's why God isn't asking you to pray harder, but to think higher. Not to shout your requests, but to elevate your consciousness. Because the kingdom's keys aren't turned with hands, but with the mind. Every time you think of his promise and see it fulfilled, you're opening a door. Every time you imagine the impossible and say, it's done, heaven moves. Every time you choose to see light where others see darkness, you activate a manifestation portal. Your mind has a language, the frequency of thought, and heaven responds to that frequency. If you vibrate in fear, you attract confusion. If you vibrate in faith, you attract miracles. That's why the Spirit trains you, so your thoughts have heaven's sound, the sound of yes and amen, the echo of it's already done. Imagine for a moment what God sees from above. A mind that survived storms, wounded but not destroyed, confused but still seeking light. And now that mind is awakening. You're remembering who you are, Designed in the Creator's image, not fears. You too can create hope, change, life with your thoughts. Because when your mind unites with the Spirit, it becomes a creative instrument. God tells you today, think as if you already have it, live as if you already see it. Declare as if it's already yours, because the moment your mind accepts it, the entire universe aligns to deliver it. That's the key. Thinking in faith, not lack. Believing the impossible is already in process. Imagining it with such detail that your soul starts vibrating in advance gratitude. Because anticipatory gratitude is the language of those who trust God's timing. Your mind isn't just any battlefield. It's the altar where heaven and earth meet. That's why from now on, guard what you think. Don't let others' thoughts extinguish what the Spirit is revealing. Don't lend your imagination to fear. Use it to visualize the eternal. Every time your mind fills with doubts, breathe and say in silence, I have the mind of Christ. Because that's not just a phrase, it's a spiritual decree. It means thinking from love, not fear, from truth, not confusion, from eternity, not urgency. And as you repeat that truth, you'll feel something change. Your mind clears, internal noise fades, and a soft light starts shining inside you. That's the sign. Heaven has just entered your thought. And when heaven enters your mind, the door to miracle opens automatically. From today, everything you think with faith will materialize with purpose. Your ideas will be spirit inspirations, your thoughts golden keys, and your mind, which was once a storm field, will now be a sanctuary where God dwells and from which favor's doors open. Because when your mind aligns with heaven, closed doors open without effort, and what once seemed impossible begins happening naturally. Heaven has a language not made of letters or sounds, but of spiritual frequency. It's the language that vibrates when a word is born from the heart, not the mouth. And that language, my child, you carry inside. From your first breath on earth, the Father gave you the same capacity He used to create the universe. The power to speak and see what you speak manifest. When God said, let there be light, light had no choice. It obeyed the voice that spoke it. And since then, every word spoken in faith retains the echo of creation. That's why heaven doesn't ignore your voice. It recognizes it. Your words aren't mere air vibrations. They're decrees that travel the Spirit's invisible paths and touch realities that don't yet exist to bring them to birth. For a long time, you spoke without knowing every word had the power to build or tear down. You got used to repeating what you saw instead of proclaiming what you believed. You said, I can't, it's late, I'm not worthy. And each of those phrases became a wall. The enemy knew it. He didn't need to destroy you with force. He just needed to teach you to speak his language, the language of complaint, fear, and doubt. And while you repeated those phrases unthinkingly, heaven's energy halted. Because heaven doesn't respond to desperation, but to faith. But the patient, loving Spirit began correcting your language. He led you to silence to teach you that staying quiet in time is also speaking. He removed people and scenarios where your words were wasted. He showed you the mouth is an altar, not a drain, and the tongue can be sword or bridge, poison or medicine. From then on, without you noticing, he started purifying your voice. Today, heaven reveals something powerful to you. Authority isn't just in what you think, but in what you declare. Because words are keys that turn the Spirit's portals. A word spoken in faith has more power than 1,000 indecisive thoughts. And every time you speak with the conviction of one who believes, the spiritual universe orders itself. God wants to teach you to use your voice as a creation instrument, not to describe reality, but to transform it. Not to repeat what you feel, but to declare what you know He promised, because speaking heaven's language isn't denying reality. It's reminding reality who has the final word. Start noticing how the world molds to your words. When you say, there's no way out, faith dims. When you say, God will open a path, the very air fills with divine energy. When you pronounce, I'm tired, your soul weakens. But when you say, God renews me every day. Something ignites inside you, a spark that reorganizes your strength. That's not positive psychology. It's heavenly principle. Every word spoken from faith releases angels with instructions. Every amen, every I receive, every grace, Lord, is a decree heaven recognizes as a movement order. Celestial messengers aren't activated by your tears, but by your voice. They don't respond to fear, but to decree. And when a child of God speaks in faith, the heavens can't remain still. That's why the enemy worked so hard to distort your language, because he knows if he gets you to declare weariness, defeat, or fear, he'll block the supernatural flow. But today, that chain breaks. Your voice, the voice heaven itself designed, regains its original power. The Spirit tells you, speak with the authority of one who knows they belong to the kingdom. Don't say what you see. Say what I see. Don't speak from the wound. Speak from the promise. There's a difference between speaking and decreeing. Speaking describes what exists. Decrees summon what doesn't yet exist. When you decree, you invite matter to obey the Spirit's word. That's why, when you say peace reigns in my home, though there's still conflict, heaven's forces begin ordering the atmosphere until that peace manifests. When you say, my body is healthy, though medicine doesn't understand, the cells hear that order and respond to your faith's vibration. Your word is creative frequency, and that frequency, when aligned with God, nothing can stop. Don't be surprised if from now on you feel your words weigh more, because they will. Heaven has entrusted you with a new dimension of authority, and with it comes responsibility. You can no longer speak lightly, because your decrees will have effect. Speak blessing and it will bloom. Speak curse and it will wither. That's why before opening your mouth the Spirit will whisper, from what place are you speaking? From fear or love? He wants you to speak with awareness, remembering your voice is his echo. That every word of yours can open or close heavens, that every phrase from your mouth must smell of hope, carry light. Because words born from a wounded soul wound. Those from a healed soul heal, restore, awakened. From today, your words won't be noise. They'll be spiritual code. When you say, I believe, heaven registers it as an order. When you declare, I receive, doors open. When you pronounce thank you, a cycle of multiplication activates. And when you say, in Jesus' name, the universe aligns with the Father's eternal purpose. The Spirit now teaches you the rhythm of the new language. Speak slowly but with purpose. Declare little but with faith. Every word of yours is a seed. Don't sow without intention. Speak like one who knows they're creating. Let your voice become constant prayer, decree of peace, melody of faith. There's a reason your words have such power. Because you were made in the image of the Word. You carry the spark of the living Word. Your mouth was created to be a throne, not complaint. And when you speak from that awareness, your words no longer travel alone. They travel escorted by glory. Remember this always. Your words are the signature of your destiny. With them, you build paths or raise walls. With them, you invoke angels or attract shadows. And you, child of promise, daughter of purpose, were called to govern with voice. That's why heaven tells you, from now on, your mouth will be altar, your tongue sword, your voice decree, and every word of yours seal of blessing. The kingdom's language is already in you. Speak with love, declare with faith, stay silent with wisdom, and watch everything around you transform. Because creation still obeys the voice of the believer. From today, heaven will hear your voice as a command signal, and earth will respond with obedience, because you've learned the secret. The mind opens the door, but the word holds it. And one who speaks in faith in heaven's language governs miracles with their voice. Heaven never leaves the trusting alone, even if sometimes your human sight only sees emptiness, confusion, or silence. In the invisible, there's movement. The spiritual world is full of life, strategies and battles fought in your favor. Around you extends a luminous, powerful, innumerable army, assigned exclusively to you. They're not symbols or metaphors. They're living spiritual realities that respond to the Creator's voice and the sound of your faith. From before you were born, your name was pronounced in heaven's eternal halls. And when that happened, a legion of angels received the order to accompany you every step of the way. Some were assigned as guardians, others as messengers, others as warriors. Each knows your tears, battles, promises, and even the thoughts you keep silent. They've been with you in days of joy, and in nights when you didn't know if you'd wake with strength to continue. You didn't always feel it, but they were always there. When invisible danger veered at the last instant, they intervened. When a wrong door closed and you didn't understand why, they sealed it by divine mandate. When your spirit was about to break, one of them breathed hope over your soul. The army escorting you doesn't rest. While you sleep, they watch. While you cry, they form ranks. While you pray, they align to your voice. Because the prayers of the righteous are instructions, heaven translates into movement. And when a word of faith leaves your mouth, angels take it as an order. The Father sends them as executors of His will, guardians of His plan. They don't act from human compassion, but from divine decree. When heaven declares something over you, they're the ones to make it real. And now, in this time when promise draws near, angelic activity around your life has intensified. The spiritual air vibrates with energy, dimensions align, and the sound of invisible wings fills destiny's corridors. Because heaven has decreed, the blessing denied, you will no longer be stopped, and they're the bearers of that order. Each angel has a function. Some carry swords of light that destroy fear's darkness. Others bear vials of oil to heal soul wounds. Some guard your paths, diverting people who might lead you from purpose. And others, more silent, work deep, restoring your environment, balancing your steps, preparing the atmosphere. They're heaven's workers, the invisible allies of the unyielding. When your prayer seems simple or weak, heaven amplifies it. A whisper on earth becomes a roar in heaven. Your amens, your thank yous, your I believes are like trumpets angels recognize. And every time one of those words emerges from your spirit, a messenger receives the signal. Move. It's time to fulfill. The spiritual world isn't measured in distance, but in obedience. Your decree and faith can traverse the universe and reach what seemed unreachable. And angels, those servants of the Most High, move at divine thought speed. They're not limited by walls, time, or space. They go where you can't, speak where your voice doesn't reach, open doors in places your physical presence has never been. That's why miracles often arrive unseen. They come by impossible paths borne by invisible hands. If you could see for an instant with spiritual eyes, you'd grasp the magnitude of the backing around you. You'd see columns of fire to your right and left. You'd see shields of light protecting your steps. You'd see paths cleared by flaming swords. You'd see angels writing your name over new doors. Above all, you'd see God's face shining over that army, guiding it with His voice, whispering, "God, what's mine? Fear no more the darkness. Heaven is more present than you imagine. No shadow can touch you without passing first through the light covering you. No spell, word, or contrary energy can penetrate the spiritual wall enveloping you. Your life is surrounded by living armor, a wall of glory, a shield of promise. When the enemy approaches, he stumbles into that light. When fear tries to enter, it fades before eternity's glow. God has deployed an army around you because what's coming is great and requires divine protection. The blessing you're about to receive can't be contaminated. So heaven reinforces its borders. There are invisible movements in your home, surroundings, paths. Doors that were stuck begin unjamming. Hearts that were closed begin opening. And behind every change is a trace, a glow, a sign, angelic intervention. But listen well, angels don't work by habit. They respond to faith. If your heart fills with fear, they stay still. But if your soul ignites in trust, they activate like fire. That's why every time you doubt, heaven waits, and every time you believe, heaven acts. You set the rhythm. Your faith is the trumpet that summons them. Your worship the signal that directs them. Your gratitude the map that guides them. And when you understand that, everything changes. You no longer walk in fear but awareness. You no longer speak from desperation, but from the certainty you're not alone. You walk with an army, backing your steps with a legion of light. You move between visible and invisible with the security of one who knows. Heaven guards their destiny. The Spirit whispers, lift your head. Don't fear the future, for it's already surrounded. Don't fear the enemy, for he's already defeated. Don't fear the darkness, for my light travels with you. And in that instant the soul quiets, fear retreats. You feel warmth in your chest, a presence around you, a different silence. You're not imagining it. It's heaven accompanying you, with angels of restitution, abundance, and justice, fulfilling their mission. While you sleep, they walk around your bed. While you pray, they bow to listen. While you surrender, they rise. And every time you say, I trust you, Lord, a wing extends, a sword lifts, a wall of fire rises. That's the army escorting you. Silent but effective, invisible but tangible, constant but renewed. They don't follow you. They precede you. They go ahead clearing paths, behind closing gaps, to the sides covering your flanks. And over all of them, the captain of the heavenly hosts, Christ himself, leads the march. That's why fear not what's coming. The war was already won in the invisible. You just need to walk in faith and let heaven's army fulfill the word already written. He will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways. Keep walking, keep believing, keep declaring. Because as you advance in the natural, heaven's army advances with you in the supernatural. There's an invisible law in the kingdom few understand. Permanence precedes multiplication. God doesn't multiply what's abandoned. He multiplies what's tended. And so now that blessing flows toward you, heaven doesn't ask you to do more, but to remain. Because power isn't in receiving, but in sustaining. True victory isn't seeing the miracle, it's keeping it alive over time without it withering. For years, you learned to resist scarcity, silence, loss. But now, heaven teaches a deeper lesson, how to remain in abundance. Because many pray for harvests, but few know how to care for the fruit. Many cry for open doors, but not all are ready to dwell on the other side. God's favor doesn't come to visit for a day. It comes to establish residence in your life. And only those who learn to remain become guardians of favor. Remaining isn't stillness, it's root. It means having faith so firm that neither pride's wind nor doubt's rain can uproot you from where you bloomed. It means caring for what's received with gratitude, not fear. It means understanding what God gave you wasn't a prize, but an assignment. And an assignment requires constant presence, spiritual awareness, soul responsibility. Heaven multiplies what's honored. That's why if you honor the peace now dwelling in your heart, it will grow. If you honor the blessing that arrived, it will expand. If you honor God's voice, it will become clearer. The secret isn't doing more, but remaining where His grace's flow doesn't interrupt. God doesn't want you running after new signs because you already are one. He doesn't want you living in alarm, seeking heaven's proofs, because you carry them inside. Favor wasn't an accident. It was long sowing now producing fruit. And that fruit needs deep roots to not die at the first seasonal change. The Spirit tells you, don't run back, don't beg again. Stay where my presence covers you, and you'll see little become abundance. Permanence manifests in three sacred forms: gratitude, purity, and obedience. Gratitude keeps the door open through which favor flows. When you give thanks, your soul declares, I recognize everything comes from you. And that declaration is the key keeping celestial portals open. Purity, meanwhile, protects blessing from ego's contamination, because success can be more dangerous than failure if not purified by humility. And obedience, finally, is the anchor keeping the world's current from dragging you from purpose. If you remain in these three virtues, nothing God has given you will be lost. Remaining also means not letting the temporal steal your eternal focus. The enemy knows he can't take your blessing, so he'll try distracting you with small things, with voices comparing you, thoughts urging you on. He'll say you need more, must prove you deserve it, that if you don't move fast, you'll lose the chance. But don't listen to that voice. God's favor has no expiration date. What He gave you was sealed with purpose, And what's sealed by heaven, no human hand can snatch. That's why the Spirit whispers deep inside, remain. Remain in my presence in peace. Remain in the faith that brought you here. Because the one who remains becomes a channel, not a container. And channels never empty, because water always flows through them. That's how divine flow works. As you share, give, thank, the river keeps running. Blessing shared in love doesn't diminish, it multiplies. Heaven doesn't invest in accumulating souls, but in flowing hearts. And you, who learn to release, are now worthy to sustain. Multiplication doesn't happen in anxious hands, but in open ones. That's why don't cling in fear to what God gave you. Protect it with trust. Fear drowns promise. Gratitude expands it. What you hold in fear stagnates. What you hold in love blooms. God's favor isn't retained by force. It's preserved with silent gratitude. Look how the panorama changed. Before, your days were waiting. Now they're purpose. Before, you asked for signs. Now you are the sign. Before, you cried for provision. Now you walk in provision, but the Spirit reminds you, don't forget the miracle's root, faith. Because the faith that brought you here is the same that'll keep it. And if you ever feel blessing cooling, don't despair. Return to the source, back to prayer, silence, thanksgiving. There, in that intimate place, the current flows again. Remaining isn't standing still. It's moving with purpose, without losing connection. It's advancing without letting go of the divine hand. It's working from rest, acting from trust, sowing from peace. When you live that way, heaven doesn't stop multiplying, because you've learned the kingdom's rhythm, repose in motion. And as you keep that connection alive, heaven starts expanding what you could barely hold before. Your blessings begin touching other lives. Your testimony becomes seed for many. Your abundance stops being personal and becomes generational. God blesses you not just for you, but so others see his faithfulness through you. That's why the Father tells you today, don't fear constancy. Don't fear the faithful soul's routine. What seems the same on earth multiplies in heaven. Remain in me, and everything I gave you will grow to cover what's around you. Remain, because the one who remains doesn't dry up. They bloom all year. Remain, because the favor flowing in you wasn't momentary. It's perpetual. Remain, because what God started wasn't a visit. It was eternal residence. And as long as you stay connected to the source, every step of yours becomes expansion. Every act blessing, every word seed, and you'll see the promise fulfilled in its purest form. You'll not only receive more, you'll become living multiplication, because the kingdom's secret isn't chasing the miracle, but staying where the miracle never stops springing. And you've found that place. Permanence in God, where nothing lacks, everything flows, where what's tended with love grows without effort and multiplies without end. There's a moment on the spiritual path when story stops being wound and becomes message. When tears no longer hurt but teach. When the soul understands every step, fall, unanswered night was part of a perfect design. That moment has arrived for you. You've gone from surviving to understanding, from resisting to illuminating, because everything you lived wasn't just for you. It was for others. God doesn't waste processes. He transforms wounds into maps, scars into lessons, silences into revelation. Every tear you thought lost on earth was collected in a heavenly vial, and each has an assigned purpose, to become consolation for someone else. That's why now your story is no longer just yours. It's become mission. There was a time you asked for explanations. Now you give hope. Before you begged for relief. Now you offer refuge. The pain that broke you became a source of wisdom. The loneliness that embraced you transformed into the voice with which you can now accompany the suffering. And though you didn't plan it, you've become a living testimony of God's faithfulness. Life isn't measured by times you avoided pain, but by what you did with what hurt you. And you chose not to harden. You chose to keep believing even when you saw nothing. You chose to forgive when everything screamed revenge. You chose to stand, though trembling inside. And that decision, that silent perseverance, activated something eternal in you. Now heaven calls you not just son or daughter, but instrument. Because the broken and restored have an authority that teaches, the authority of survival. Your voice won't be theoretical. It'll be medicine. When you speak, you won't talk of what you read, but what you lived. Your word won't be speech. It'll be power. And every time someone hears you, their spirit will know what you say doesn't come from a book, but from fire. God raised you to inspire, to heal, to remind others faith does sustain, grace does transform, promise does fulfill. What was once ruin is now foundation. What was crying is now a river of blessing. And that river no longer flows just to you. It flows through you. Your testimony will be tangible proof God's love is stronger than human pain. And every time someone approaches seeking consolation, you won't need grand words. Your presence, serenity, clear gaze, peace will suffice. Because the peace you carry now isn't borrowed. It was earned. Earned with nights of prayer, years of silence, tears no one saw, but heaven honored one by one. You've reached the point where your story stops revolving around you. Now it revolves around purpose. You don't live just to be blessed, but to bless. You don't speak just to tell, but to build. And every person crossing your path, every soul hearing you, will be touched by heaven's energy flowing through you. Because when someone surrenders into God's hands, heaven transforms them into a channel of light. And that's what you are now, a channel. Through you will flow words, gestures, consolation, clarity, miracles. You won't have to strive to help. Your mere existence will be help. The grace covering you will reflect in your face, actions, voice. You'll be beacon for the wandering, shelter for the trembling, echo for those without strength to pray. God tells you your story will no longer be repetition of pain. It'll be seed of hope. I'll make what you lived become testimony, and your testimony become mission. Through your life I'll show, I fulfill, I restore, I am. And as you hear that voice, you feel something expanding inside. No more resentment, no more questions, only gratitude. The weight of the lived dissolves into understanding. Now you know why it hurts so much. Because what you carry wasn't just for you, but for many. Every time you speak of what God did, heavens will reopen over you. Every time you give testimony, new blessings will fall. Not as reward, but confirmation. Heaven multiplies the sharer because it knows the voice healing others also heals itself. And when you look back, you won't see ruins, you'll see roots. When you look forward, you won't see uncertainty. You'll see legacy. Your life is no longer a circle of pain, but an ascending spiral of purpose. Your passage through the valley wasn't loss. It was preparation to guide others from their own valley. The Holy Spirit that sustained you when no one else could now walks with you as ally. He'll take you where hearts are broken, dreams dead, and use you as resurrection instrument. Not for what you say, but what you radiate. Because one who's known darkness and seen light becomes a living torch. This is your time of expansion. Heaven positions you in places where your story will be seed. It'll bring you before people needing exactly what you lived, and you'll do it without fear. Because now you know you don't speak from the wound, but from healing. Not from lack, but from inner abundance. You're no longer just miracle receiver. You're miracle bearer. Your life is a letter written by the Spirit, read by all who approach you. And when they look at you, they won't see perfection. They'll see redemption. They won't see human power. They'll see divine faithfulness. They'll see the same God who sustained you can sustain them too. And in that full awareness, you realize something. Your mission isn't to preach with words. It's to live as evidence, to walk with love, look with compassion, serve without expecting. Be the walking testimony that heaven fulfills. Even when no path seems there, the Father tells you once more, you're no longer just story. Your heritage, what you sowed in tears, you'll reap in souls. What you lived in silence will now speak aloud. Your testimony will be mission, and your mission multiplication. And so, as the invisible sun of purpose rises over you, you understand your life didn't stop at pain. It transformed into eternal purpose. Your voice will echo hope, your walk remind of grace, Your existence a living altar proclaiming to the world that God still writes miracles with human stories. You've gone from the one asking help to the one extending hand, from seeking signs to being the sign yourself, from needing miracle to becoming miracle for others. Because the testimony heaven restored in you is no longer a closed chapter. It's the mission opening paths for generations. And so, after this journey of revelation, promise, and transformation, heaven pauses over you. The entire universe seems silent. Stars incline their light, angels form a circle around your name, and a voice stronger than thunder and sweeter than breeze pronounces the words sealing your story. My child, the blessing they denied you already belongs to you. You won't have to lift a finger, because I already moved all heaven for you. I hid you to preserve you, processed you to prepare you, raised you to show my glory through you. Everything that seemed lost returns to its source. Everything that hurt gains meaning. Everything you waited for becomes fruit. No more struggle, no more anxiety, only the peace of fulfillment. That peace not from the world, but from the God who fulfills every promise. Now you walk differently, without fear, without weight, without doubts. Your spirit knows heaven is on your side. You're no longer who started this path amid tears. You're the version born after the fire, the one who knows every wound was a door, every weight a seed, every loss a transformation. Heaven smiles because you understood. It wasn't punishment. It was process. It wasn't delay, it was design. And what you now possess isn't just blessing. It's identity. It's been crowned with purpose, sealed with light, anointed with authority. Everything once denied now flows toward you with river softness and thunder force. You no longer ask, you thank. You no longer seek, you manifest. You no longer doubt, you rest, because you know grace isn't conquered. It's received. And when the soul surrenders, heaven acts. That's why, as the divine voice fades softly on the horizon, one phrase floats in the air, written in golden fire over your destiny. The blessing they denied you will arrive without you moving a finger. And it's not promise. It's decree, not wish. It's fulfillment. Heaven has already sealed it. Angels already carry it. Time is already aligned. The portal is open and nothing can close it. Now lift your face, breathe deep, and feel the new life entering you. The cycle of waiting has ended. The cycle of fullness begins. You walk under a different heaven, a heaven that moves with you, responds to your faith, shines with your purpose. The Father tells you with infinite tenderness, live in peace, because my promise is already alive in you. What you awaited has begun. What you dreamed manifests. And where there was once denial, now there'll be multiplication. And as your soul fills with gratitude, a certainty ignites deep inside. It was all worth it. The silence, the wait, the pain, everything was necessary for this moment to arrive. Thus your story of denial closes, and your story of abundance begins. Because the heaven that never forgets, never lies, never arrives late, has already decreed your fulfillment. Comment in your heart as an eternal pact with God. I receive, I remain, I multiply, because what heaven sealed for me is already done.